We are back on We Want Winners, and we're only about a half an hour after the 49ers just got trucked by the Houston Texans. And what's funny is as I was thinking about this game, I thought, I think Houston is probably going to win. The Niners are still very much beat up, and it's in Houston, early game. Like it just felt that way. Like I think that it's going to be a close game, but I think Houston's just going to get the better of them. And then I saw Houston's injury report, and they're missing their two top receivers, and I was like, wait a second here. They're missing their playmakers, which means they shouldn't be doing too much offensively. And they put up like 400 something yards on the 49ers today. It was
That's crazy.
wild. It was so wild to see the 49ers just defensively seem hopeless. Like I don't know what the problems were outside of the injuries, but as we know with this team, the injuries are just the one constant about this team is that they're just going to be injured. So you kind of have to put that in the rear view. But just looking at what the personnel that Houston put up there offensively, I was like, oh my goodness, like how does the 49ers defense get beat up like that so badly when you know what's coming? A little bit of running and nothing but short passes. And, Upton Stout turned every Houston Texans wide receiver into Wes Welker for whatever reason. Like that was a rough game for Upton, rough game for their secondary just in general. Like a lot of their young players are running into each other and tripping over their own feet. It was crazy. But I guess if you think about it, this is like a game for them to learn from. I'm sure they're going to be all over the tape, exposed on the tape. But what was your thoughts coming into the game? Like, did you think that they had a pretty good shot to win, or did you sort of circle this one as maybe one of those that you didn't really expect them to really come out firing on?
Well, after watching because it was one of those things. I think it happened on air. I know it did happen on there last week when I started looking ahead to to this week's game, and I looked at um the record of the Texans, and they have the points for and against. And it's like, what,
Yeah.
61 points? That was insane. But then, they kind of got worked a little bit by Seattle. And my thoughts coming into this game is that one, I pretty much figured that the defense would be on alert because they
Yes.
had, given up like more points than they had in like any three games up to that point. And then when you factor in the whole, there was another one of those situations where D'Amico knows us backwards and forwards, so that I figured that would create a problem. But what I saw last week also on the offensive side of the ball was I was like, well, if Robert can scheme it up, they look real shaky. They looked real shaky, and Stroud looked tentative. And I was like, if we could figure out a way to get some pressure on them and get them doubting themselves early, who knows? Maybe we can keep it close and just make it a rock fight and win like 9-6.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's kind of what I expected that game to be like today.
what I did not expect is that they would just be able to hold the ball for 10 or 12 minutes at a time, which I mean it was crazy there in the first half where we didn't have any first downs, we didn't have any third downs, and we had like 100 total yards. It was really bizarre. And then we went out and you know picked up that touchdown, and then we cut it to 11, and it's like, oh well, maybe. But that defense is just, they are so good, and they look like we looked, you know, once upon a time.
Yeah.
And everybody flying to the ball. We never had two pass rushers like Hunter and Anderson, but I mean, it was. I am really impressed by their defense, and we just, I obviously at this point, you know, solid schemes are unassailable. I mean, he's just running out of bodies at this point. It's really, really, um, everybody talks about that ridiculous claptrap of next man up, but at a certain point, when you're bringing in street free agents and they're the next man up, I mean that you are asking him to turn water into wine at a certain point.
So to that point, I will give you a list of the guys who were inactive for this game for the 49ers. Um, so obviously, Brock Purdy, Jordan James, who has not yet been active, Ricky Pearsall, Jake Brendel, Bryce Huff, Yetur Gross Matos, CJ West. So from Jump Street, you are starting with your probably obviously Mikael Williams is a starter, but he's not necessarily and has yet to be really a pass rusher. And then whomever your fourth string defensive end is, and then up the middle, it's all secondary players. And then I know Alfred Collins had gotten hurt, but I guess he came back in, and they had more injuries unexpectedly, or expectedly, I should say. They had more injuries. Jordan Elliott ankle, Sam Okinawanu ankle, Collins shoulder, D Winters knee, and Collins returned to the game. I've not heard about the D Winters at all, but Shanahan said the two ankle injuries don't appear to be high ankle sprains. Shanahan and what appears to be and not appears to be after games has been a rough one for us this year so far, because Nick Bosa's ACL tear did not appear to be an ACL injury when he got hurt either. So we'll see what happens. But like the thing that I was, and this is just my sort of like very fan heavy understanding of defensive concepts, but from a very juvenile point of view of NFL defense and what defensive coordinators have to look at and what Robert Saleh is thinking about, knowing that the Houston Texans are going to be without two big weapons. Like my assumption was like, okay, they will play a little bit closer because they're not really worried about getting beat over the top. And the coverage will actually help the pass rush a little bit, because we know the pass rush has been in flux. And then now without Huff, good luck. So that was my thinking, like just for my mediocre understanding of defensive NFL concepts. And so then I'm watching the game and I'm just going like, okay, they're doing okay, but why on 3rd and 5 are they giving up the middle so much, like so easily, like without even any struggle? Like, why aren't we testing Stroud to beat us over the top? Are they worried about him running? Are they, what are they worried about? Are they worried about the backfield? Because when I was watching it, I was like, okay, I and when you watch NFL football, you kind of see the line of scrimmage at the beginning, and then you just see wherever the ball travels. And I'm watching from that view, and I'm like, oh, there's Stroud's first guy. He's wide open. He's got to throw to that guy. Boom, first down. And then, oh, I see what he's doing. He's letting the receivers run their routes, and then he's throwing to this guy out on the flats. He's wide open. And I can see that from my television view of the game. I didn't even have to look at the all 22 tape or anything. And so I'm just wondering, like, why are they not attacking those things, knowing that they don't have the receivers to really beat them over the top? Like, why wasn't that more of a focus? And we'll have to hear if the coaches talk about that. But what did you see when it came to defensive game plan, especially with the secondary?
Well, the first thing that was shocking to me was the lack of any pressure. If they didn't blitz, if they just rushed four, there was just nobody anywhere near CJ Stroud. So
Yep.
that was like shocking. Shocking. It's shocking to see. I mean, I understand the reason why. They just don't have any they don't have any professional pass rushers at
Yeah.
this point. And that's not a slam on Collins or Williams. It's just both of them, if you read their scouting reports and watched any of their tape, and looked at their college statistics, that was going to be that was something they were gonna have to learn at the NFL level. They weren't quality pass rushers in college. So to expect them to come in year one and to give them anything there was wishful thinking. But it was shocking to see this offensive line, which has long been talked about as one of the worst in the league. That was the thing that immediately came to mind after about a quarter is, oh, this 49ers defense is a get right defense now. This is a defense that teams that are struggling, they're going to be looking to get here and try to get some things working because it was just it was too easy. Like I say, they had like a half hour's worth of of time of possession in the first half. It was for an offense that, if you just look 1 week earlier, was clearly struggling with their identity. They were leaking confidence. The offensive line was bad. CJ Stroud was missing open receivers. And look, he was doing that early against us too. That's why I felt that if we could kind of shake him up just a bit, we might be able to get inside his head and continue the bad taste and the bad feelings he had from last week, and and, continue his little doom spiral. But we did the exact opposite. We allowed him to make some throws, get some confidence, you know, break off some huge runs. So then the offensive linemen are feeling pretty good, like, they could dominate these dudes. And that's, when a team is leaking confidence, that's the last thing you want to give them is any sort of good feeling. And we're all the good feels at this point. So I don't know, that was the most concerning thing to me in the first half. And then moving forward, it was honest. There are very few times, these are professionals, they're all professionals. I you know, once they got up, by 11, I was like, man, this is like mathematically, I just don't see these dudes
Yeah.
scoring another 12 points against these guys. And I didn't see how it was going to happen. Their defense was playing so well, and our offense was just scuffling. And then I feel bad that I'm like not as gung ho as everybody else is on Mac, because I was like, look, he's gonna get hit a couple more times. He's got to throw a pick at some point in these proceedings. I just don't see how he's gonna give us, you know, 12 or 14 more points. But and
I'm actually surprised that throw that you're talking about, which is the throw to Juwan Jennings, which they picked it off on the 1. I'm actually surprised the announcers did not get on Mac for that throw, because that is exactly the coverage that you want. Juwan Jennings, big receiver, tall receiver against a smaller DB. Mac threw that ball in the only place the DB was going to catch it. Like, JJ had all of the advantages on that play. You need to throw that thing up for grabs so that JJ could use his physicality, get up there and score. And that seemed to be like an easy throw for Mac. And I was joking with my kids on as we were texting back and forth about the game. I was like, now I understand why the New England fans were so frustrated with him. Like, that was New England Mac. There were that throw, it frustrated me, but they were already down 11. They were going to have like this miraculous comeback anyways. The ones that bothered me the most were the third down throws, 3rd and long, and he's throwing 5-yard outs. And I was like, well, what does that do? Like, you don't have any receivers outside of Christian who can actually run after the catch. Like, every throw that you make that is down the field, you have the reality is that more than likely they're going to catch it and get tackled. That's just the playmakers that they have right now until, Pretty Ricky comes back. But it was the 3rd and 8, and then we're throwing it 5 yards and hoping that somebody makes a play, throwing in front of the sticks. Even the last play of the game, it's like 4th and 13, and he throws it for 8 yards. And I was like, why do we even have a route that guy goes 8 yards? Unless they were trying to set up a hook and ladder or something that I didn't see. But like that was what was bothering me too. And I get it. He's a statue. He's been getting hit. He's also hurt. I'm going to give him that. That is what we understand. But the getting rid of the ball so quickly when his whole game is sitting there and waiting for plays to develop. That's the thing that frustrated me the most. And I was like, well, that's New England Mac. Like that's why he's available to us as a backup. And this is no shade because I think I saw the stat that he was leading the league in passing yardage per game, the whole league. Some of that is because the Niners had been struggling to run the ball so much. But, we haven't had that version of Mac where he's just ripping it down the field in a little bit. But I just was it seems like the media loves the Mac story. Like they're in love with this Mac and Shanahan story. And I'm like, yeah. But can we say the things that he is not doing well in this game? Like, what is this like? We cannot criticize this guy for just taking sacks and running into his own offensive lineman to fall down and take another sack. I think he got leg whipped by his own guy on one of those sacks. And so I'm not anti-Mac in any way, but I know it's a good story. We can be critical of the guy. Like there's very clear things that Brock Purdy does way better than Mac and probably would have helped out a little bit today. So I don't know. I just think the Mac love is very interesting to me from a national media level.
Well, it is, I have been want to say this week on social media, and again, I don't have anything against Mac Jones really, but you know, wins we learned this during the Jimmy G era is wins aren't a quarterback sack. But you know what is? Sacks. Sacks
Yeah.
is a quarterback stat. And Mac does not do very well getting, not taking them. Look, it's just the facts is that we're never going to see, and never is a long time. I understand that as I'm saying it, we're never going to see another 9-figure quarterback with Max profile. They aren't making them. You could look at high school and college. You don't have statues playing quarterback anymore. You have to have some level of mobility to be able to play that position. And he is just not mobile enough to do that in a to be given the keys to somebody's franchise. What I do believe is what he is now is as a number 2, he can make a lot of money doing this because if he is your backup, he does a lot of good things. He makes a lot of great throws. You
Mm-hmm.
just have to understand that there are going to be some things that come with it. He's going to make you 5 or 6, excellent throws, but he's going to put the ball in harm's way 2 or 3 times as well, and he's probably going to take 2 or 3 sacks. A quarterback who had just average mobility wouldn't take. But you have to, but all of that considered, he's still a very good backup quarterback. If
Mm-hmm.
you've got him, he's, you know, that you're very you're solid at that spot with him
Yep.
there.
Yep. Let's go back to the defense for a second here. I was kind of thinking similarly to you, how are they going to get pressure on CJ? And we talked about last week how Saleh was so fantastic into mixing Penix up, and Penix was confused a lot of that second half just from the different looks. And they even mentioned on the call that the 49ers were trying to do some things very similarly to mix CJ up. And I guess I did see one or two things where maybe he threw the ball a second too early, but he had his opportunity to sort of figure everything out because he had so much time back there. And even when they blitzed, it was almost like the blitz was in the wrong spot, and so it allowed CJ to escape the pocket, so maybe they didn't have that edge covered up in the way that they wanted to. But it just seemed like after last week, where what they did looked fantastic, this week they tried to do some similar stuff, and they just were not as sharp with it. Even I think there was an Upton Stout blitz where he actually got a hold of CJ. I think that's the closest thing that they had to any sort of pressure whatsoever. I'll look at the stats in a second. But did you see the same? Did you see some of the same things that they were trying to do last week that just didn't work, or did they have to pull back on some of that stuff?
Seems like we just our defense is built on pressure, and he called some great ones, like that one that Upton Stout he solid for somebody who doesn't do it often. I don't know, maybe that's why they just seem so effective. There was one earlier where I want to say it was Winters who came in on one. I don't know that he even got the hit, but it definitely made him get rid of the ball quicker. He's great at calling them, but it just hurts when you can't get any other pressure without that. And yeah, it seemed like, especially early, that they were trying to rattle him, but they just, you know, they couldn't make it happen. And then once he just started feeling, confident, it was, we were out the gate, because he had like 200 yards passing in the first half. It was just really daunting watching them try to get to him, and they just couldn't. They couldn't make a play, and they just couldn't get off the field.
Per ESPN stats, 2 quarterback hits, 0 sacks. So
Mm.
that's how close they got to him.
We got a pick though,
We did.
finally.
We did. I didn't even see it because I was watching on. I have Hulu Live television. Like, I don't have cable.
Mhm,
Actually, I do it through Hulu's live streaming. And
mhm.
so I started the game a little bit late, and then I came in, and usually it's really good at allowing me to just fast forward and then eventually catch up to the live viewing. But for some reason, it kept screwing up and it kept popping me back out. And so I'm trying to get back to live game. And so I get to the Kittle touchdown.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to get past the Kittle touchdown, and it keeps flipping me all the way back to the beginning of the game. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I restart the whole app, come back, and then I try and get back to right after the Kittle touchdown. But then it takes me live, so I'm seeing the halftime highlights. I was only like
Mhm.
10 minutes behind. So I'm trying to
Right,
get
right.
back, and I can't get back, and I'm just like, "Okay, forget it." Nothing
Mhm.
I'm just gonna guess nothing happened, after the touchdown, but I guess something did happen.
Yeah. Demo
So
interception. They were trying to, and it's one of those plays where if we had had a competent offense, it might, we got the score, and then we got the interception, and then it was Johnston pointed it out that tried to run it back, whereas um if he had just took a knee or ran out of bounds, we were in a position of the field where it would have been like a chip shot field goal. So
mhm.
we left points on the field there, which, who knows how that 3 points might have changed. Because as it turns out, we were if with that's fuzzy math, obviously, because if you add that three, then we're playing for a touchdown and a 2-pointer to tie it, which, I don't like to play those games. That's kind of mental gymnastics, but nevertheless, yeah, the streak is dead. 15 straight is over.
And of the snaps that I watched, they weren't anywhere close to making any play whatsoever on the football.
No, no.
So, what did you think about the tackling? Because I'm watching this game, and I had 2024 visions as I was watching with all the missed tackles, especially now their run game wasn't anything special. It was there to, kind of just make the 49ers think about it. They did run 36 times, 157 yards, 30 of that was CJ, and one of those runs was a 23-yard run by Woody Marks. So the Niners were not fantastic in the run, but it's not like Houston used that as the big, as the biggest reason why they won the game. But there were so many opportunities for the Niners to stuff them for 1 or 2 yards or even losses, and the wrapping up was just not there. And some of it is, the Texans running backs were just like not giving up, and they're running through the play and picking up extra yards. But that tackling, it just reminded me of last year, because there's so many times last year where we're like, they read the play correctly, and then they get there, and then they can't finish. And there was a lot of not finishing in the backfield today, I thought.
It really was, and, it'll be interesting to see the PFF numbers, but Mustafa was in position several times to
Yeah.
make a play and just flat whiffed, and then there's the classic one where he just kinda overruns it and falls down, and, Marks just kinda scoots by him. But, yeah, that was a big deal. Another thing, along those lines is Jair Brown, he does a really good job flying down in there and making tackles on the run, but he is terrible in coverage. And it's
Yep.
just like you, it's one of those things where you see a guy being good at something. So obviously you want to do that thing, but that thing can bite you. You can't be a safety who is thinking about getting down into the box first because oftentimes you have coverage responsibilities that don't allow you to do that. And if you're always trying to cheat to get into the box, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. So offensively, it's a whole lot of nothing. If you look at the box score, Christian 8 carries for 25 yards. Mac actually had 23 yards rushing himself. Um, Juwan Jennings led the team with 4 catches. Him and Kittle 4 for 45, 4 for 43. I kind of wanted to have a Juwan conversation here, because Juwan had he had a moment in the offseason where he really tried to use some leverage, knowing that one of the ways that the 49ers pay their guys is to kind of just redo their contract every year, push up some guaranteed money, which helps them in the cap, and then they just go along their way. And the 49ers did not do that with Juwan Jennings this year. They were like, nope, we're good. You want to, you want to hold out, you hold out, buddy. And it was sort of unfair. And I could see from Juwan's perspective how unfair it was, because of his, his last several years, including last year, which was his best season. He steps up when they lose BA. But at the same time, you look at where his career is going with the injuries, and with their inability to really, or with his inability to stretch the field. And you sort of get it from their perspective too, which is, we did this with you last year. You had a good season. We don't really think that you're going to be in the future plans for the next year, and thus we're not going to, redo your deal so that you get more money up front. We're happy that you're just going to play on your current contract. And so then, it's kind of now a prove it year for him. And he has had so many injuries to start this season. I don't know how truthful he was when he said he's playing with broken ribs, because that doesn't sound great at all. And he's had opportunities to kind of step up and be that guy that he was for them last year, and it's just not happening. He would have hit on one of the longest passes of his entire career, which would have jump-started this offense in that second half, and he just dropped the football. He came back on that same drive to make a great catch on the sidelines, which got a first down and helped them, but he basically dropped what was either going to be a score or a 40 to 50 plus yard play. And so when you bet on yourself in that way and it doesn't actually work out for you, and unless he has a really good second half to his season, this is not going to be a great season for him. He's just too hurt and he's so slow right now. What are your thoughts on him? Because he's been such a good player for them, and I don't even really want to criticize him for doing the thing that he was trying to do, which is as an NFL player in this insane NFL players market. Like he's just trying to extend the lifespan of his career, knowing where his body is going to end up being such a physical receiver. Like, what have you thought about his season so far after everything that happened with the holdout and such?
Well, it's gone awful for him because, like you say, the way they positioned him is he is definitely in a prove it year, and he hasn't proved much, and it's not due to any fault of his own. But what I will continue to say about the offseason of 2025 as it relates to Jawan Jennings is it is a cautionary tale of what happens when you, in good faith, go out there when your money is not secured and then you get injured and you guess what? They are not going to take care of you despite the injury. No, it's that not I don't know that they were willing to give him, anything near what he expected, but it definitely wasn't going to happen once, the hamstring injury came about. It was a wrap on what that was. And then it says a lot about him. And it's a tricky conversation because at that point, it's a prove it year. So do you just strap it up and go out there, which it seems like he is doing, or do you just wait and get healthy? And then at whatever point you are really healthy enough to play, you go out there and put the best tape possible out there. It's a you know, it can be a damned if you do, damned if you don't either way, because if you go out there like he is now, all banged up and you're not productive, nobody, is grading you on a curve because you went out there hurt. They're just looking at the
Mhm.
fact that your numbers aren't what they were. And then you play that game and you just wait until you get healthy. Then you get dinged for not being able to go out there and play. So it really is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And that's what I always remember about this Juwan Jennings situation is it's just he is really in a no-win position at this point. And then what happens at the end of this year when he's a free agent and it comes time to, get his money and I'm looking at the receiving stats and it's like, Kendrick Bourne is right there behind him. Who gets the most money in a contract? At this point between those two as free agents. It's just going to be a very, very, it's going to be a very interesting offseason for Juwan Jennings.
I would imagine teams look at them similarly, like the style of player that they are. Jennings is, if you have he's better for the Niners system because of their running game. But we've seen Kendrick Bourne get loose in situations where Juwan Jennings has not been able to get loose. So to that extent, like if you bring a guy back, do you take Kendrick Bourne for less money than JJ? You probably do at this point if you're pinching pennies like the 49ers are pinching pennies. They had another receiver debut, Jordan Watkins. He kind of had a moment where it was like, okay, Mac Jones they're trying to come back. They have a little bit of time left. Mac Jones is putting a ball in his hands, and I think he jumped a little early and it went through his hands and the 49ers were done. But you see him on the field and you're like, "Oh, great. Like I wonder what they're going to do with him." And they didn't, this was late in the game. I'm not exactly sure what his reps were. We did see a little bit more of Demarcus Robinson than we've seen. We saw some Sky Moore out there late as well. But I guess it was good to see Jordan Watkins finally on the field. And you kind of wonder, you know, at this point, the Niners are 5-3, so they are very much in this playoff picture. But if you had a Jordan Watkins versus Sky Moore battle right now, who gets more reps? I think we'd all want to see Jordan Watkins get the reps, even in special teams. So I do hope that they make a decision to kind of give him some opportunities, unlike in the past when, Jacob Cowing would be out there for like, a screen pass and then that's it. I do hope that they try and do something because it does seem like he has different skill sets than the current guys that they have, the current, veteran receivers that they do have. Like it seems like he's got some skill sets they could try to take advantage of, but we know how Shanahan is with rookie receivers. They're just like maybe his least favorite player on the roster. But do you think that, they're going to try and do some stuff with him? Like, would you like to see him get an opportunity to play? Because what they put on the field today, I can't imagine he does much worse with the opportunities that a lot of those guys had today.
Well, I am not wanting to sound like I'm giving up on the season at all because there's a lot of football to be played. But at the same time, I am of the belief that if we are making decisions between either trading for veteran, journeyman type players, or playing these young dudes, I say we play the young dudes and just, see what we've got with them. That makes more sense to me. You heard Kyle talk this week about what they are looking for. They would like to trade for, um, young players with upside. Well, wouldn't everybody? But who's trading young players with upside? Why if they're young and they've got upside, why would the team that they're trading, why would the trading team trade them? And also, if they are trading them, you have to assume that in that case they know more than you know, and you probably should be wary about
Yeah.
making that trade.
Yeah.
If he's young and he's got upside, but they're willing to trade him off for a draft pick, that should probably make you, if nothing else, be extra diligent with your prep before you make that trade. So yeah, I am with you on that one. I would just assume see what Jordan Watkins has to offer. Not to say that, again, with all these young players, that you can make any sort of long-term decisions based on what happens this year, positively or negatively. If positively, if Dominic Pooney is a test case, again, I've been telling people all off season that growth and development is not linear.
Hmm.
And, everybody just thought, well, after that good rookie season, he's on his way to all pro. Well, a lot can happen in a second year player's trip on the way to all pro. And we're seeing it play out. Now, does that mean that Dominic Pooney won't eventually be a good player? No, but it does mean that when a first year player to expect a first year player to just continue a steady ascent up to their prime, that's just not how football or life works, so you have to um understand that there are going to be peaks and valleys with all of these dudes. And I would just assume the young dudes get their valleys out of the way to whatever
Yeah.
extent you can control that by just giving them reps and letting them play and letting them figure it out. Um I don't want to say in low stakes situations, but they're not gonna get any better sitting on the bench, I believe, than they
Hmm.
can with being out there on the field. And even if that means making mistakes, that a lot of times in life and in football, you make your biggest gains after crushing mistakes, unfortunately. And they just need to be able to get out there and play. So yeah, I would be an advocate for that. Is just let's man, everybody wants to go trade for a 31-year-old experienced defensive end. I just don't think
Who
you
would
can
probably get
trade.
hurt in his first game with the 49ers the way the season's
Right. And if
going.
you look at all of these dudes that they're talking about trading for, like Henderson, he was on the injury report this week.
Yeah.
I just don't. I wouldn't do it. I would just, if you can get a draft pick, if you can trade a draft pick for somebody with the rationale that this dude has NFL experience and he is equivalent to something that you would get in next year's draft, I'd do that. But I'm not trading for like the Malik Collinses or the those the Arden Keys or those kind of. I'm good on that. I just assume let the young guys play at that point.
Should they try and trade for some depth though? Like we're talking about the Arden Key guys with the idea that, well, they're going to be an upgrade from some of the younger players. But what if we don't even have the younger players because everyone's hurt? Do you at least need a little bit of these maybe better second stringers, so that you can put NFL quality players on the field at this point?
I would be low to try to trade anything above like a 6th round pick. If I could get somebody like an Arden Key for a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick, I'm just not interested in being in the business of trading draft picks that should turn into players
Yeah.
that you can have on cheap money deals for 4 years at this particular point. And because none of these, but while I agree with you, we need replacement level NFL players. I just don't want to get them at the cost
Mm-hmm.
of the future at this point. You got guys like Eric Kendricks that are out there. I'm interested in those guys who are
Mm-hmm.
the Eagles just signed Brandon Graham back. I know that's very, very specific instance, but there
Mm-hmm.
are NFL level guys out there with experience that I would scour the earth for those guys first. The ones you could sign for no money or trade, you know, what I like to call lotto pick draft picks. 7th round. We got Brock Purdy on a 7th round pick, but that was more of a dart throw than nobody scouted Brock Purdy and thought, well, he could be. One day we could pay him $181 million guaranteed.
Right.
That was don't you can try to pretend that somebody saw that, but that's crazy, especially when you look at the rest of that draft and saw that you came up with Butkus, and then that last pick turns into him. It that reaffirms that was a dart throw, and that's what those late round picks are. So if you want to um forego a dart throw to get somebody that can come in and help you, because like he ain't great shakes, but Arden Key is a professional football player,
Right.
and he is better than anything else that we're trotting out there right now. No disrespect to Michael Williams and Alfred Collins, but Arden Key is a better football player than both of those guys are right now. Does that mean that they won't be better than him at some point? Not at all, but not today. They aren't better than him today. And like you say, at this point, we need guys that can play next week.
Yeah.
Because because you look at the record, as bad as today looked, this is not over by a long shot. And
5-3.
if you look at the rest of the league, somebody that is as good or maybe even worse than us is going to be that last playoff team. Why not us?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Brock, and then we'll get out of here. So Brock it's been this whole thing early in the week. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? By late in the week, nope, not going to play. I think last week they said he may have worked out before the game. Was it before the game or maybe late in the week? And it was just like, nope, no go. So they had this game on turf, next week in New York, or at the Giants on turf. And then
Mm-mm.
the following week would be the Rams at home. And so that seems to be like a nice date to circle. But what if he doesn't play that game? Then you're kind of doing this dance of like, at what point can you even rely on him to come back? Because so what they said was, they said, now I don't understand this injury at all, because basically what they said is when they put him back on the field in that Jaguars game, the only thing that would have re-hurt his toe or maybe made it worse is if the angle in which it was hyperextended the first time, if that happened again, then you're putting him at risk. And supposedly it happened again. That's the part I understand. Is it just like bad luck, or is it because it was hurt the first time, it's easier for it to get in that same spot again? That's part of the science that I don't know. But then they said turf versus grass doesn't matter. It's just the way that the angle in which his toe gets extended again is what matters. So I'm so confused about what this injury actually means. But if he's not back by that Rams game, like, then can you even rely on him for the rest of the season? Like, you look at Joe Burrow's. It sounds like Joe Burrow's injury was a little bit worse, but still, they just iced. They pretty much said he's on injured reserve, or he's going to miss most of the season or whatever from Jump Street. And the Niners didn't say that about Brock. They're like, he's kind of week to week. And now here we are. Is he not going to play until week 10? Like, that's kind of interesting. And if he doesn't play during week 10, then can you rely on him at all for the rest of the season?
Yeah, Burrow had the surgery, and like you said, he is out until mid-December, if at all. So then they made that call immediately. But again, I understand it's like a strain type of thing, so there are degrees of it. But I had a doctor once who had turf toe, and she like was walking. She was like on one of those little knee scooters, walking around, so she wouldn't even use the foot, because the way she explained it to me is it really is just like a flexion injury, and it just hurts anytime your big toe flexes. So think about that. Walking is for her was it was painful for her to even walk. So I mean, let's if you can't walk around your job, playing NFL football is that's a high bar. So it's going to be interesting that now we're 4 weeks since he's last played, and it doesn't seem like there's any end. There's no way he plays on that infamous Meadowlands turf. Even if he had a bang up practice week, I doubt they would put him out there for that. And then so like you say, that means the Rams at the earliest. And I can easily see where if it's not there, you probably don't play him in Arizona. Wow, I mean, it gets to the point where do we even see him before the bye even? I mean,
Yeah.
that's you know, I but I that said, Mac is playing well enough
Their
that I
buy is
would just
so
assume.
late.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
but I would just assume wait until Brock is, they can clear him fully, whatever that means, and just get him ready for the stretch. I just think Mac has played well enough. As much as I, joust with the fans over their irrational love for him, I just think that he's been playing well enough that whatever it's gonna be is probably better than a compromised Brock, and especially, and even if it's not better in air quotes, when you factor in the notion that, like we happened with Jacksonville, that putting him out there too soon, we could risk losing him for the rest of the season. So when you factor that into the mix, I just believe that it's best to be um, as cautious as possible with him and just keep trotting Mac out there. And what I don't understand is why we have just decided that we'd rather have Adrian Martinez than anybody else in the world who who has possibly taken an NFL snap. So where's Nate Sudfeld? I
Yeah.
would feel a lot more comfortable with that even
I
than
might I might take Nate Montana at this point. How old is Nate
and
Montana?
yeah, it is Adrian Martinez, no disrespect to that young guy, but that is just a scary proposition that, Mac is like one hit away from the Adrian Martinez show.
By the way, I don't think we want Nate Montana. Nate Montana's 36 years old. That makes me feel really old.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh,
where's State Montana's kid? Maybe
yeah, yeah,
maybe.
exactly. Where's the third generation Montana that we can keep our eye on? All right, so the Niners play the Giants next week, another early game for us. Cam Scatterbo goes out today with a really
Mm,
nasty ankle
that looked
dislocation.
awful.
And Jackson Dart, uh, the second coming, they are still struggling. They got boat raced by the Eagles today. They're 2-6. So this is a game that the Niners, even in their most beat up state, should go in there and win. But this has also kind of been a house of horrors for them injury wise. So I don't even know what to think about this game quite yet until I know who's going to be healthy and who's not going to be healthy. Like, because I can't imagine they want Pretty Ricky coming back his first game back from injury on a field like
Mm-mm,
this. You probably
mm-mm.
save him for the Rammies when they come into town the following week. But I mean, this is a game that they kind of have to win. You cannot lose your second straight game here to a team that is just getting smoked by some of these other teams. I think they had let me see if I can find it. I was looking at their numbers. Actually, it looks like I'm out of it, but oh well. Um, they're not really playing competitively in a lot of these games. Like their two wins, they had an impressive win over the Eagles 3 weeks ago, which is kind of what they're hanging their hats on. But they lost to the Saints by 2 touchdowns. They
Right.
they they let the Broncos come back and score 30 some odd points in the fourth quarter last week. Eagles score 38 this week. So this is clearly a game that the Niners need to just kind of utilize in the same way that maybe the Texans utilized the Niners this week as a kind of get back to normal game. So, but I just don't trust them going into New York on that field. It just feels like a house of horrors to me. So I'm not making any predictions necessarily, other than it's kind of like a game that they have to win. But without the rookie Scatterbo going out and Jackson Dart, it just seems like you can probably rattle him similarly to the way that you rattled Penix. So I think they should win this game. But after today's showing, like nothing is certain for me right now.
Right. It is it's that and what ends up happening, I tried to be the voice of reason when the Falcons were coming in and everybody was talking about how, what a game that was. But it was like, yes, they had beat Buffalo the week before, but they had lost to the Falcons early in the season 30 to
Hmm.
nothing. So you have to look there's a totality, like they talk about any given Sunday. These are professional football players. So yes, any of them are capable of having a great performance any week, and you could be the unlucky recipient of their best performance of the year and lose. That said, you have to, if we're still talking about what the Giants did 3 weeks ago and not talking about these last two performances where, they've basically given up, 70 points over the last 2 weeks, I would think this could be a get right game for us. But again, on the other hand, I know that their defense has some really good pass rushers. And if anything we saw today, um, Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau are going to be fighting and arguing over who's going to line up over top of Colton McKivitz because there were several times, and there's no disrespect to Colton McKivitz because Will Anderson is one of the best pass rushers in the league, but there were several times where he just literally just ran right around Colton McKivitz like he was like a traffic cone. It really wasn't even fair, and the Giants have 3 of those guys.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's one of those things where when you look at the statistic that they're giving up, this would be a place where you think Matt could get back on track and have a good passing game, but then you could also see where they just make it so uncomfortable for him that they hit him in a way that the Houston Texans were not able to. They were able to pressure him, but and they got a few like hellish hits on him, but the 49ers, either by running it or whatever, not even running it because that was not well running Matt more to that point, were able to um not get him hit as much as I thought they would um this week, but that's I'm looking at the stats this week. um yeah, they the Eagles were able to they hit Dart 6 times and they sacked him 5 times. So and mobility is supposed to be his calling card. So again, maybe we can get some pressure on him. Um so yeah, we should be able to beat them. I think. I think we'll be favored, and maybe we can go in there and get right back on track. I would not like to come home 5-4 with
Yeah.
the Rams coming into town, though. That
Yeah.
is would be like the worst case scenario.
All right. So next week we have another morning game, and if we can, we will live stream after that game. We'll sort of work that schedule out. And tomorrow, while I won't have a live stream, I'm gonna try and get a hold of Jarrett Seidler from Baseball Prospectus and talk about the Tony Vitello signing from his analytics brain of baseball, and see what he thinks about the Giants going into the college ranks to get the rah guy. And then Brian and I will also be back at some point this week talking about the Warriors. So did you get to watch any of the Warriors?
I did, and I loved it. It was um trying to be quiet because my sister-in-law is a Denver Nuggets fan, and I didn't want I didn't want to be disrespectful in her house, but Steph was shimmying and I was shimmying, and it was it was there's nothing quite like when Steph gets it going. I am more than ever before just really relishing
Yeah.
what he has meant to us and the team, and I am every time that he goes off this year. Yeah, I hope to be there and I hope to witness it. I am so appreciative of that dude and all the good times that he's given us.
Yeah, can't miss any games for the while he's doing this. It's like you just got to watch them all just in case.
Just I on a side note, I watched Freaky Tales again, and it was I have you seen it?
Yes.
Yes. So it for those who haven't, it um to tell it's an anthology movie set in Oakland in 1987, which is like my peak early warriordom, and Sleepy
Yeah.
Floyd was my guy. And again,
Yeah.
it is historical fiction. So if you ever see it, and I don't think Sleepy Floyd was doing all that, but what it led me to believe the morning after I was on my walk, and it just had that movie had me reflecting on as a 15-year-old Warrior fan. Then I could not even imagine 4 championships in
Yep.
my lifetime. That was just not in the cards of 15-year. I didn't even, I would have to. It got so bad at a certain point that I would have to like pick like a playoff team because we weren't gonna do anything in the
Yeah.
playoffs. So I had to pick a team. So I just say that to say this era of Warriors basketball, even if obviously it's at the tail end, is something that I will cherish because I was there when this was just you couldn't even imagine it. You couldn't imagine it.
Yeah, my buddy Sheed from Warriors World, he calls Jimmy, Draymond, Steph, and Al Horford. He calls them Unk Nation, and he and
That's great.
it's they're gonna have games like they did against Portland where they're like, we do not want to run up and down the court with these young bucks. Like we'll get some rest here after the fact, but then be prepared to beat a Denver. And they have interesting back-to-back on Monday. I think it's Grizzlies and Clippers. And so that's part of this process this year is to see which games they get up for, which games they kind of half punt because of the way that the schedule works and how you want to keep your guys rested. So but in those games that they may try to punt, then that's when you see Jonathan Kuminga and Will Richard and Brandon Pajemski, and those guys get opportunities to play. So there's even some solace in those games that the vets are not maybe going to play, their full allotment of minutes because you get to see those guys. But all righty, that is it from here. Thanks for everyone who was checking us out live on YouTube, and for those of you who listen to this on our podcast feed. If you are listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and by the love in your heart want to give us 5 stars, we would appreciate that. As I've said on all of our shows, if you do give us a 5-star review and somehow I can see the Apple ones, it's a little bit harder for the Spotify ones, but I will check from time to time there as well. We will read your review live on air, give you props, give you love, give you a shout out. So definitely do that. All right, that is it. For Rod, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.